introduce Steve Del Sesto, who's the receiver in the St. Joseph's Health Services Pension Fund receivership. Steve, you there?
Yes.
Come on in. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Obviously, you're at the point person since mid-August, about 2 months ago, almost two months to the day.
Yes.
That you've been appointed. It seems like years in journalism land. We've probably talked 100 times. And this is one of the biggest pension collapses in the state of Rhode Island's history, if not the largest.
As far as I'm aware, I know that there have been other pensions that have been involved in receivership matters, but there's been no pension plan specifically by itself petitioned into a receivership.
And this is about as complex this wasn't one company who was in business for 30 years and all of a sudden went out of business and somebody milked the pension fund and ran away to the Caymans. This is a situation of maybe as complex a situation as possible. Let me walk through a couple steps and you jump in and correct me. First of all, it was St. Joseph's Hospital, a affiliate of the Catholic Diocese, the Diocese of Providence. It was run as a Catholic hospital, and the pension fund was what is called a church fund, right?
It's under federal law. It has a distinction of being what's called a church plan. So it's a trust that was formed to hold the assets of the plan, and then the hospital, St. Joseph's, the hospital, designated it as a church plan, which is a designation under ERISA, federal law, which allows it to be exempt under ERISA.
And then St. Joseph's got merged into what was everybody knew as Roger Williams Medical Center, along with Fatima, and they created a new hospital group called Charter Care. Correct. And that took place around 09 or 10.
That's correct.
And it kind of took a little while because of the merger. And they were, none of those entities were particularly healthy when that transaction took place. It wasn't like one big entity picked up two smaller entities and gave it great financial stability.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in those transactions, but it's my understanding that the reason why that merger did take place is because individually they were having some financial difficulties and they would be stronger together.
And that may not have worked out so well because by 2014, Prospect, a California for-profit healthcare company, came into Rhode Island and acquired the three entities, then called Charter Care. And again, for the second time, that acquisition went through what's called the Hospital Conversion Act and was reviewed both by the Department of Health and the Attorney General's office.
That's correct.
And they said, deal's good to go, and everybody had the expectation that hoped that under the broader, bigger corporate entity, there would be some stability to those three hospitals.
I think that's the hope, having been involved in hospital conversions myself. That's always the hope, is when you have an acquirer come in, that you hope that they will bring both money and stabilization to the facility so that it can operate into the future.
So deemed a success publicly, I think, in 2014, according to press reports. And then on August 16th or August 17th, I think the hearing was on the
17th, and the order was entered on the 18th.
Lo and behold, the pension fund of those retirees or still employees of St. Joseph's that were entered into that system find out that the plan is bankrupt?
I wouldn't say that it was bankrupt, but that it was underfunded to the point that it would not be able to pay out the benefits that it's required to pay out for the life of all of the vested pension holders.
And that entity that went into the courts to get it placed into receivership identified that it needed a minimum of $43 million, I think is the number. Yeah. I think there's some belief that that number is on the low side of what the potential need to pay out all the retirees for their full time on Earth. And second of all, that in order to make payments in some fair structure, they recommended to the courts a 40% cut in retirement payments to those 2,800 folks.
That's right. Yeah, in the petition, exactly as you said, they identified what they believed, and I'm not exactly sure, as I stand here today, where those numbers came from, but that they believed that the pension plan was underfunded by approximately 43 million, and that they believed that a 40% cut across the board without any distinction between age or amounts or anything like that, a 40% across the board cut of pension benefits would be one of the ways that this pension plan could be saved.
The retirees clearly were caught completely off guard, and I think everybody in regulatory agencies, elected officials, the media across the board, I think, were pretty surprised at the news.
I think that's an accurate statement, and I believe that is probably the function of the designation as a church plan. As a church plan, in addition to not needing to make minimum contributions, the reporting requirements to the people that benefit from the pension are much less stringent, and in some cases don't even exist.
Right, so you're not getting a monthly statement from Charles Schwab saying, here's what's in your account, and et cetera.
No, you're not.
So as we've been peeling back the onion, both as media and as lawyer, and other attorneys involved, you brought on Max Wistow, who is involved in recovering funds for the state of Rhode Island, or Economic Development Corporation, now Commerce Corporation, yep, in the 38 studios. Is you find out that at least back to, looks like 06, 07, minimal contributions were made, really only 2 years contributions were made.
That's correct. I think the 2 years you're speaking about are 2008. In September of 2008, $1.5 million was contributed to the plan. The next contribution appears to be 2014, which was the $14 million that came in as a result of the Prospect transaction.
And based on the actuarial reports during that period of time, it looks like that only met a small portion of the amount that needed to be contributed in order to keep the fund to whatever level that was being designated, keep it solvent and moving forward. Although it's not clear if, when they say it's 100% funded, if that really means 100% funded in actuarial land.
In actuarial land, and this is a very, it's a confusing point, and it's a very important point that we're looking at. In actuarial land, this plan was said to be, in 2014, funded to the tune of about 90 to 92%. That figure is misleading in the sense that it only means as of that moment in time the petition was funded to that amount. So in essence, you're looking at it and saying, what should the hospital have contributed to the plan up to that date? And they gave Prospects $14 million, brought that underfunding or lack of prior year funding up to 92%. So as of that date, the plan had received the funds that it needed up through that date to be 90%. But quite frankly, even if it had been 100%, we would still be in the circumstances we're in today. Quite frankly, even if it were 110%, we'd be in the circumstances today.
And within a few months thereafter, the actuarials said that an additional $15 million needed to have been contributed in order, not $14 million that year, but actually $29 million in order to get it to the 100% funding level. And as you said, the 100% funding level really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really mean anything from a standpoint of paying people out over the course of their lives.
That's right. It only is relevant if you know that the plan is going to continue going forward, meaning that it's going to continue to receive contributions and it's going to continue to earn investment interest. If either one of those are not in existence, that 90% or 100% number really is irrelevant for the future viability of the plan.
So let's talk about where we are now. There was a big court date last week.
Yep.
And I think many of the people who are probably tuning in now are retirees who, some of them were there and some of them were picketing at the diocese or at Superior Court. Right. But walk through what the important key matters were that took place under Judge Stern last week.
Okay, there were three key matters that I brought to the judge's attention last week. One, I asked the court to authorize me to engage the firm of Wistow, Sheehan, and Lovely, which is Max Wistow, Steve Sheehan, and Benjamin Ledsam, to assist me in investigating claims. The court, subject to anybody objecting as of the close of business yesterday, said that it would enter an order to do so. The order was submitted to the judge today, and I believe that if he has not yet, he is signing it before the close of business today. In addition to that, I asked the court to grant me the ability to subpoena the trustee of the plan, which is Bank of America, as well as the two individuals that the bank has so far identified as the parties who are authorized to direct them. That is necessary not because there's any wrongdoing on either the individuals or Bank of America's part, but purely from a matter of law. In order to bring a trust into a proceeding like this, the trustee has to get notice, and if the trustee lacks discretion, as I believe Bank of America does here, then those parties that direct it need to be provided.
And that took place.
And that took place as well. And then the other, and I think the most critical point for the pension holders, is that, as we talked about earlier, the petitioner, St. Joseph Health Services of Rhode Island, Inc., the former hospital company, asked the court on October 11th to cut pension benefits across the board by 40%. With a receiver now having been appointed, it's really, in my estimation, it's not appropriate for the petitioner to make such a request. Now that analysis and that recommendation falls into my lap. So I asked the court to do what we call, in the legal process, to pass their request, which basically means take it off the table indefinitely. And the only time it will be brought back before the court is if I ultimately decide that that's the best recommendation to make to the court regarding benefits. But as of right now, the 40% request no longer has any bearing on this case until I bring it to the court's attention in February of 2018.
You had already gotten a court's agreement to hold off on any cuts to the pension payments at least through February 1 of 2018 in a previous hearing.
That's right. On September 8th, I had asked the court to give me more time.
Right.
But with all the confusion surrounding that 40% cut number, and quite frankly, the anxiety it was causing to all of these pension holders, I felt it was best to ask the court to just take that off the table so that people don't have to really worry about it anymore.
So if the court, it's 4:40, and in Courtland, that's end of day over there at Benefit Street. They're not cooking the midnight hour over there.
No.
So he's probably signed that. Max Wistow gets signed tomorrow. Is that fair to say?
Well, actually, if when I get back to my office, if the order has been entered, I'm sure the judge will forward it to me. As soon as that happens, I will sign the engagement letter with Wistow, Sheehan, and Lovely and send it over to that office, and they will be off doing what we brought them in to do, which is see if there's anybody who we can bring claims against, which might result in money coming back into this plan for the benefit of the pension holders.
The complexity, and I can say this, and you don't necessarily have to, the complexity of the number of corporate entities, the number of law firms, the number of actuarial firms, the number of money managers, certainly creates a scenario in which there are a slew of folks that potentially have some liability. And based on what we saw in the 38 Studios pursuit of recovering money, Max is not shy about pursuing just about everybody under God's green earth in searching out those funds on behalf of the retirees.
I would agree with that. I'd say that at this point we don't know who, if anybody, we can hold responsible, but if there is somebody or a number of parties that could be held responsible, Max will figure it out.
It's my understanding that subpoenas will go out, some level of subpoenas will go out sometime this week, and that's really going to start the process. You will then go into depositions, I assume?
Yeah.
Both requests for information to be turned over and then scheduling interviews with folks?
That's
under
right.
oath?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's something that Max's office is taking the lead oar on, and the primary oar. He is sending out those subpoenas once the engagement is official via the court order. those will go out, and they will be a collection of requests for documents as well as depositions and other types of discovery.
And will some of these entities try and quash these subpoenas? Will, I don't want to use hypotheticals, but I'm going to throw one out. The Diocese of Providence may say, well, and they've said this in narratives in the Catholic, Rhode Island Catholic, the diocese newspaper. Oh, we didn't have any responsibility over the hospital for 1,000 years or however many years they went back. Well, they say, oh, we shouldn't be subpoenas. We shouldn't be subpoenaed. We shouldn't have to turn over records.
It's my hope that won't happen. But having been involved in litigation, it is something that you can anticipate will most likely happen. And we will deal with that as it comes. And Max will deal with that as it comes. It's all part of the process of litigation. And ultimately, I am hopeful that I, with Max and his office's assistants, will be able to figure out everything that we need to figure out and identify if there is anybody out there.
Of those that you may be potentially pursuing, are they going to try? You saw it in 38 Studios. Some responded quickly, triggered their insurance policies, wrote the check, got on with business. Others, in the case of Wells Fargo and one of the advisory companies, First Southwest, they've been acquired, but kind of ran the clock for as long as they possibly could until the cost of litigation was almost more than what the claims were. There were reports that Wells Fargo spent more than $10 million in litigation battling through, and then ultimately made a $15 million payment or so, $15 or $16 million to the state of Rhode Island. Do you get any sense of what the ebb and flow of this? And if you're a retiree, you're an 80-year-old woman who worked 30 or 40 years as a nurse at St. Joseph's, you're not getting a big pension as it is.
Right.
Social Security is not paying you a big number.
That's right.
You can't wait for 5-10 years of litigation, which some of these things. How do you balance those things?
It's a good point, and it's a difficult question. The litigation is, the litigation process is the process that it is. We can, and I know Max's office will do whatever they can to get as much money in the door as quickly as we can, and we will look at every source. Unfortunately, the reality of it is, it is unlikely that we will be able to do anything with regard to our litigation claims, to the extent we have any, for quite some time. We'll probably be concluding the investigative process right around the February-March area. It might take longer, I'm guessing at that. But we will be pursuing it. It's just not going to be a quick process. And the unfortunate piece of all of that, or the unfortunate result, is that I'm going to have to adjust benefits, at least in the interim, so that we can protect the
Not before February 1st, though.
Not before February 1st. But on February 1st, I do not see, because we won't be anywhere near the litigation point where we can say we're going to be collecting money from whatever party, that I'm going to have to make some adjustment that will result in a cut of benefits of some way, shape, or form, because that will be the only way that we can protect this plan while Max and his team do their job. It's an unfortunate inevitability in this case.
Right now, healthcare in Rhode Island, I don't know if you saw the news, Care New England announced that they were closing Memorial. The deal with Prime Healthcare fell apart. In part, Prime wouldn't assume the pension liabilities of Memorial, somewhere in the $70 million range. So you're seeing this potential domino effect, and some of it being tied to the obligations with pension funds and pension payments. Are we worried that, you've been involved with this, you were involved with Landmark back in the day, and in that bankruptcy, is that a bankruptcy?
Receivership.
That was a receivership. And are we, is this the canary in the coal mine of, oh my, we've got a number of big healthcare, it's a big employer, it's, the biggest healthcare is the biggest employment sector in the state, and in almost every state. Where are we on that from your expertise?
Yeah, it's a very disturbing question. These healthcare facilities, healthcare is in a very difficult position right now, as you can see, with Landmark and with the charter care situation, also with Westerly, that there is a need to bring in acquirers for these hospitals, because not only the pension plan, but they have other debt based on reimbursements where they just can't sustain operations. And unfortunately for acquirers, such as either a Prospect or a Prime or something like that, there's a big difference between taking on a liability that's related to the hospital's operations and taking on the liability for a pension plan. So unfortunately, I don't know how it's going to play out, but I do think that you're going to see, maybe not necessarily in a receivership, but you are going to see problems arising more often with these pensions as businesses like Memorial and other hospitals start to either close or reorganize or things like that, and acquirers don't want to assume these obligations. They weren't assumed in Landmark. The PBGC, which is the federal insurer, came in there. This is a case where we have to determine whether or not we can actually get PBGC to come in and what that would mean.
On St. Joe's.
On St. Joe's. Westerly, I do not believe that pension plan was assumed by L&M. And now we're seeing, as recently as today, Memorial, the deal closed, based on what I've read, in part because of the inability or unwillingness of Prime to take on that obligation.
Talk about Landmark for 1 second. What was the payout on the pension structure? Do you remember ballpark as to what they earned on the dollar?
I do not remember exactly. That was a multi-employer plan, and the PBGC did come in. That was an ERISA multi-employer plan. So for years, Landmark had paid premiums to the PBGC. There was no question as to whether or not that was an ERISA plan, and they came in and they took care of, it was not 100% payout, but they took care of the lion's share of the obligations under that pension plan.
Let's go back to St. Joe's. You've been at it a couple months. You've had communications with a lot of the players involved in this. Let's go down through the list. The Diocese of Providence own St. Joe's. Have you had communications with them?
I've had a couple of conversations with their counsel.
Outside counsel over
counsel.
At Partridge?
Partridge,
Yeah.
A couple of conversations, very amicable conversations, very cooperative. But beyond that, nothing substantive.
Have they provided any, have you requested any documents? Have they provided any documents?
I have not requested anything from them yet. I'm going to assume that they will be part of the group. I'm not sure how many rounds of subpoenas we'd be sending out or Max would be sending out, but I assume that the diocese would be in that mix, but we haven't asked for anything yet.
It's been an unusual situation for us. We've always had a very cooperative structure with the diocese and Bishop Tobin. I think in our 7-year history, anytime we've asked him a question, it's been amazingly responsive, sit-down interviews on any, and even on complex things, questions of improper behavior by priests that emerge, things like that. And since this has hit, literally cold silence. So it's been a very unusual situation, a very frustrating situation for us to be able to get information out, and people can interpret it as they see fit. Let's go over to the charter care world. Have you had communications with, I hate to use all these sort of insider play, but the old co, meaning not Prospect yet, but the old entity and those players who are still have administrative or responsibilities to the old company?
Well, I've spoken to Rick Land, who is the attorney who represented St. Joe's, the hospital entity that petitioned the plan into receivership. I've had several conversations with Rick. I've met with one of the board members.
And there are 3 board members, 2 of which are brand new.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them was brand new as of, I believe, July 2017. The other one...
Great board to get on, right?
Yeah.
Join in July, into the biggest pension failure, and months later.
I give her credit. I give her credit for coming on. But I met with one of the board members in Rick Land from the old co.
Yeah.
That's it. They have been very helpful. I have asked for many documents from them.
Have you received any of those?
I've received everything I've asked for. I've either received or I've been told that it's been requested, and it's just not they're not easy documents.
It's in Iron Mountain or someplace
Correct,
like that,
correct.
yeah. And then one of the key members who has had the longest longevity on that three-member board goes all the way back to when it was a diocese hospital is Father Riley.
That's correct.
Yeah.
He's one of the three current board members that existed as of the date of my appointment.
Okay, go up to Prospect. Have you had any communications with Prospect?
I've had several communications with their in-house counsel, just the in-house counsel at this point. Again, the communications have been very open and free. I haven't requested any documents from that entity. But I have had multiple conversations and have no complaints about the discussions that we've had.
Hospital conversion went through functionally twice, 8, 9, 9, 10, whatever you want to call it, and then in 14, so the first time with the merger into Raj Williams, and then the second sale over to Prospect. 2 state entities have responsibility, the Department of Health and the Attorney General's office. Let's go to the Department of Health. Have you had any communications with the Department of Health?
I have had no communications with the Department of Health as of this point. I haven't initiated any. Quite frankly, I'm not. The reason is more because during that regulatory approval process, the Department of Health doesn't really deal with the issues that I would be looking at as far as that.
Looks at patient care and quality of patient care.
That's correct.
The Attorney General has the responsibility over the sort of the fiduciary responsibility over the assets and protecting the interest or analyzing the interests of employees, retirees, et cetera, et cetera. Have you had communications with the Attorney General himself?
I have not had any communications with the Attorney General
Have you tried?
himself. I have not tried. I have had discussions with the current healthcare advocate in that office, both regarding this petition as well as discrete aspects related to the conversion application that I had questions about. And again, the communications with that individual have been very open and easy. No,
Have you asked for any documents from the Attorney General's office?
not as of yet. Not
Okay.
as of yet. And keep in mind, part of the reason for that is, one, with Wistow, Sheehan, and Lovely getting in place, they would be doing a formal request for documents. Additionally, the documents that I'd be looking at this point, or over the past 2 months, relate to those conversion applications, or those are public documents.
And then the union's been involved, UNAP, and have you had conversations with UNAP?
I've had many conversations with UNAP and working very closely with UNAP. I'm fortunate in this situation. I've got a relationship with UNAP. I've worked with them before. They were involved in the Landmark transaction as well as the Westerly transaction. And so I've gotten to know the players there very, very well. And I have the fortunate, although it's an unfortunate circumstance, I do have the fortune of basically being in a position where we have a similar goal in this case. So we are really working together and trying to achieve the best result possible for the plan.
Some of the other players are the actuarial firm, Angel Pension Group over in East Providence. I think we've reported on some of it and published some of them. They've been responsive to your request in providing you those actuarial analyses and reports that were given to the different entities at different times over about the past decade, correct?
That's correct. Angel's been very cooperative. I've met with them a number of times, spoken to them many times, and any request that I've made of them has been responded to as quickly as they could.
Have you got any feedback from, I know you've also briefed the governor, Senate President Ruggiero, Speaker of the House, Mattiello, Seth Magaziner was here a week ago Friday. He had mentioned that he had sat down with you.
Yes.
Anybody else that's been involved, interested, trying to be a good partner advocate on these things?
Obviously Arlene Violet
Right.
has...
I was going to get to those,
Okay.
the issues of who the retirees and what the classes
Right.
are, and
As far as like state leaders, the speaker, the Senate president, the governor's office, and the treasurer, as you said, I've met with all of them.
not the governor though.
Not the governor. The treasurer was gracious enough to offer his and his staff's assistance to the extent that it would be appropriate. They obviously have a high level of expertise with regard to
We hope
pensions.
so.
We hope so.
Yeah, right.
And matters like this, and I was very appreciative that he extended that offer, and I have taken advantage of it thus far. And I hope to continue to take advantage of it to the extent that it can help us. But other than that, I have not had any other communications with any other state leaders, although it is my intention to make sure that each one of the ones I just mentioned are kept up to date on what's going on, because this matter is important for the pension holders, who are their constituents, and also to the extent that there is something that the legislature can do to avoid this problem in the future. I feel that they need to be as apprised of what's going on as they possibly can.
Have you begun to look around the rest of the country at similar scenarios in which church plans have, gone through the same exercise? And I know there's a bunch of federal court cases, including a case that went to the Supreme Court this past, the ruling came out in July, but there's other cases, one in the, don't hold me to the circuit, but out of New Jersey, 8th Circuit,
Right.
That had some analogy to this. It was a church, it was a hospital that was affiliated with religious organization. It went through some sales. It had a similar demise. Are you getting any ideas? Have you talked to peers? Is there any opportunity to learn from others?
There is an opportunity to learn from others. This issue, as you just mentioned, the church plan issue is a very hot issue right now.
Across the country.
Across the country.
Right.
So the U.S. Supreme Court came down with a decision in June of this year, which helped to clarify a small portion. It didn't clarify the entire complexity of church plans, but it did clarify a little bit. There are a number of cases out there that are dealing with it. I'm aware of, just about a week ago, ironically enough, a hospital called St. Joe's in New Jersey came to a settlement with their pension holders regarding the very issue as to whether or not it should have been treated as a church plan. And I've had some discussions with some people in those states that are dealing with it. I've also spoken to some national publications that deal exclusively with pensions to get some guidance on any place that we could possibly look to see if there are opportunities that we wouldn't be self-evident in this process, just to make sure. This is a unique situation, what I'm being told from everybody around.
Well, we're good at that in Rhode Island, right?
We are.
38 studios, we give a gaming company $75 million,
Right.
And now we've got a great pension failure.
That's right.
Right.
So from what everybody has told me, while there have been attempts to put both private and public pension plans into bankruptcy proceedings, there's never been a pension plan, from what I've been told and for what anybody around the country has told me, in a receivership proceeding. It's a very unique way of dealing with this problem, this very serious problem. And it's creating challenges, some that have never been dealt with before. I mean, bankruptcy is a close corollary to receivership, but it's not exact. There's a code there. There's no code here. So it gives us a little more flexibility and a little more freedom to kind of do what we need to do to try to get the best result possible.
Let's go to the classes and wrap up
Okay.
on that. You mentioned Arlene Violet, former Attorney General, ferocious advocate, and she's representing, last count that I knew of, around 300 plus much older retirees in the 70 plus age group, and she doesn't have all of them, but she has a group of them. The total universe of folks is 2,817 or something like that.
2,729.
2,729. You know the number changes about every week. 2,729. She represents about 300 of the older group, and they're in the most distress, right? These are folks that have very small pension.
Based on the age and the time that they retired, the group that Arlene is representing, that she's collected, seem to be, based on everything that I've seen, the ones who are collecting the lowest amount. I mean, the smallest pension that I've seen is somewhere in the vicinity of about $75 a month. And it goes up from there into a couple to a few thousand. But the ones that Arlene is purporting to represent, that larger group, all fall probably in the lower range of the pensions collected. And a lot of that's due to the fact that they retired quite some time ago when the wages were not as good as they were later on.
And then let's go to the polar opposite, and then we'll go to the middle. And the polar opposite, the youngest member of the 2,700 plus is
early 30s.
Early
so
30s.
33, 34 years old.
And that group of the younger group, some are still working at the hospital.
Some are still at the Prospect-owned hospital.
Correct.
So it's a different hospital
Right.
now, but it's the same facility.
Right. And there's a group there, and some of them are represented by the union, but some of them are not, correct?
If you are still working at a Prospect-owned hospital in Rhode Island, at least for purposes of this one of the St. Joe's, former St. Joe's, former Fatima, then you are still covered by UNAP. Obviously, there are non-union members there, but if you were in UNAP before, you're still in UNAP now. So whether you're 33 or 53, if you're still working, you'd be a union member if you're a dues-paying member.
And then some have left, but they're younger members and they're working elsewhere, healthcare or not healthcare.
That's right.
And there's hundreds of those.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm trying right now, and on Thursday, or I'm sorry, Friday, I believe it's the 27th, is October 27th, Friday. I go into court, and I'm going to be asking the court, among other things, to really identify 3 core groups. Those may get diluted a little bit more as we go on, but I want to make sure everybody has a voice. So we have Arlene's group, which are the older, disabled, too old to get another job and to try to offset any loss that comes from this pension. You have the unions group, which are they're still employed. Some may or may not be receiving benefits under this plan, but they're covered by the union. And then there's that middle group, which are...
Is that the biggest group, the middle group?
It really is the biggest group.
1,500 or so?
Something in that range. So I want to identify them as a group which are no longer in the union or never were in the union. Not old, maybe, but not so old that they couldn't get another job. Maybe not collecting benefits, maybe not eligible to collect benefits, but really because they don't fall into Arlene's group and they don't fall into UNAP's group, they really need a voice. And that's important for me, not only to make sure that everybody here has a voice, but also as I travel down this road, because we are all looking at the same goal, it's really important to me that we all work together to come to a result that may not be ideal for anybody, but is at least palatable for everybody.
There's been a flurry of activity, obviously, in the first 2 months, and there's been a fair amount of communications. We've written on this story probably 20, 25 times. But, it is going to get into the mundane. There won't be a hearing every 2 weeks. Max will be doing his lawyer work. How do the retirees, how do the folks that are impacted by this, besides us dragging you over here on a regular basis to talk to them, how do they get a sense of empowerment, involvement, that folks care about them, that folks are fighting for them? How do they get some assurance that this process is working in their best interest?
Well, I could tell you, I care about them. I'm going to be working every day for them. On most things, I probably can't speak for Max, but I think I can speak for Max that he's going to be doing the same thing on that. Other than that, this will be a case. While there won't be a hearing every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it's my intention that I'll be in front of the court no less than every 3 months. I'll be providing information on top of that to the retirees. My hope is that by creating those groups, they get a voice. So if there is a concern, it can be brought to my attention. I've set up a website where people can keep track of things. I've set up an email address and 2 phone numbers. It's my hope to keep this as transparent and to keep the information flowing as much as possible. This is a very, very important issue for these people.
Yeah.
This is not insignificant at all. A cut of even 10 or 20% for some of these pension holders will be devastating. So certainly the suggestion that was made in the petition of 40% or anything else that I may have to come up with is going to be very, very difficult to handle. And it's important that everybody has at least the feeling like they have a voice, that they have a way to communicate what they're going through, what they're dealing with, what concerns they're coming up. Every day life happens. And while there may not be an issue today, something may come up tomorrow. And while I won't be able to do anything on a 1 or 2 person basis, the more I know about it and the more we know about it, the more I can, if it's possible, if we can do something, we can get in front of the court and make some adjustment, some way to try to help things out.
For those of you who are tuning in who don't know, there's also a Facebook account run by a lot of the retirees, and there's 600-700 members to that. And obviously, we're on this thing on a regular basis. I want to thank you. For those who are watching, Steve's been incredibly open, available, giving us information whenever he can to be able to get out to folks, and we'll continue to press him on that. So we greatly appreciate that. There's been tremendous transparency. Listen, we're a news organization that presses very hard, and we criticize a lot of elected officials for not being transparent. This is a situation where he's been wonderfully responsive, and if he changes that behavior, we'll let everybody know accordingly.
Sure
whether it's in court with a lawsuit like we did on 38 Studios with the governor or elsewhere. So I really appreciate him and all the time he's putting getting the information out. And I think it is imperative in this situation that as much information gets out, that doesn't adversely affect what Max is trying to do with his thumb screws and waterboarding related to the litigation. So we'll continue to press forward on that.